Hello and welcome to The Entrepreneurs on Monocle Radio, the show all about inspiring people, innovative companies and fresh ideas in global business. On today's programme, how can winemaking push the boundaries of tradition? We'll meet a founder whose curiosity and love for travel inspired him to create a unique, truly global blend.
We work with the winemakers in each region. We respect the techniques of the country to make the variety the best we can. And then our fun side comes into blending, to creating something interesting and new and making something truly unique.
And later, we'll hear about the challenges and opportunities facing the industry from wine writer and Monocle friend Chandra Kurt.
It's a kind of a total time of fragmentation. And I think for a lot of wineries, it's not going to be easy to keep up with all of this new orientation and changes.
This is The Entrepreneurs with me, Tom Edwards. You're listening to The Entrepreneurs. Travis Braithwaite is the founder and owner of Pangaea Estates, a Cape Town-based wine company that boldly questions whether going local with your vino is always best. With a background in business and winemaking, Travis set out with the rather audacious concept of creating a wine that could bring the world together. In 2022, he finally launched Pangaea globally after a decade of preparation, alongside the world's most famous wine blender, Michel Rolland. Travis stopped by Midori House on a recent trip to London, and he began by telling me about the start of this incredible journey.
So the concept of Pangaea, I started probably back in about 2010, sort of formulating the idea for this wine. For me, growing up in Stellenbosch in South Africa and getting into the world of wine, it always sort of plagued me as to why, in a world that is so accessible with globalization affecting almost every industry, why the wine industry had stayed so traditional, so conventional, so singular in origin. The Bordeaux blend, 5-varietal Bordeaux blend, is the king of blends. It's classically known. It's made all over the world. And particularly in South Africa, for me, I sort of found guys were producing the product, and 2 or 3 of the varieties out of the 5 were never really that strong in terms of, grown in a good place, but not the optimal area to grow that variety. So I thought to myself, what would happen if in this modern world, we understand viticulture, we know where certain grapes thrive. So I thought, what would happen if we sourced grapes for each variety in a Bordeaux-style blend from the country of origin where the grapes have adapted the best to ripen? As most people know, making wine begins in the vineyard. The cellar is where we put the finishing touches and a few little effects on it, but getting the best grapes you can ensure you can make the best wine. So I thought to myself, what if each of those varieties had the ability to ripen the best and be the strongest it could, and what would this blend then taste like? So for me, it was more a play on sort of not making anything better than everyone else, but making something different, making something the world had never seen before, making something truly unique. And we are the first wine of its kind in the world to ever be made with 5 varietals. So I started the task. I took a year off and I traveled around and I tasted grapes and I tried wines and I sat in hotels blending things in my head, and some of them were terrible because at the time I was still a bit confused to the project. And then slowly over time, it started to formulate and the idea started to get a little bit stronger. I then called a gentleman called Michel Rolland, the most famous winemaker on the planet, convinced his PA to let me talk to him, got 5 minutes of his time, which turned into about half an hour conversation, discussed the idea. Michel, being someone who's worked in every single place that wine has ever been made, basically, gave me a few questions back and said, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And I said to him, I've explored it, but not finalized it. So he said, cool, go off and give me a call in a year's time from now. So set a date in my calendar on my phone. A year later to the day, I came back from more traveling and I phoned him and I said, I've addressed this concept, this thought, the ideas on this variety. This was a Friday, I think it was, if I'm correct, a Friday or Thursday. And he said to me, great, what are you doing next week? So I was like, I'm in Cape Town. He's like, come to Argentina. So I got off the phone, booked a flight, packed all my documents and all my theories and thoughts in my head, traveled all the way down to Argentina, went down to his winery to meet with him. And we spent 3 days smoking cigars, drinking wine, chatting, spending time with friends, listening to jazz. And then on the final day, when I was sort of starting to panic because I hadn't heard anything about the concept of being involved, we sat down at a table, he lifted a glass and said, cheers, let's do this. And then we started the negotiations as to how it was going to work between us. And I left Argentina with a plan formulated. Michel came to South Africa, that was 2017, later in the year. I flew samples from all over. We tasted a whole bunch of different barrels, varieties from all over the world, came up with the blend, sort of sat in the room completely confused and astonished as to what had happened. Called a logistics company and said, just make it happen. Here's where they are. This is where you need to move it to, and I'll figure it out while it's going. So Michelle and I then had dinner. Next morning, woke up feeling a little less than fresh after celebrating, and the wines all started moving. Then I started reading heavy amounts of documents on importations of wine, logistics around it, and figured it out as we went. And 2015 is the inaugural vintage. So you've got the first one ever made.
Now, let's go back. You said, look, people called me crazy. I think they use some more robust language than that in certain quarters. And we know
Not
that,
to my face.
that wine and winemaking, it's not just for the connoisseur. It's for everybody. But there's also connoisseurship of a level beyond even other sectors, other products. And people are so exacting. They're so demanding. And tradition looms so large. Just give some context for that, because particularly in certain markets, I don't want to generalise, but I don't know, in France, for example, terroir, this idea, the ownership, the sense of place is so baked into the DNA of the products, and not just the grapes, but the process, the people. It's all taken very personally. So were you aware that there were going to be places that just didn't even want to hear about it, far less, I don't know, try it or work with you? What was that like at the beginning?
Of course. I mean, to be honest, I have other companies that make wine, single origin stuff. First of all, to put it this way, I've had comments of, you hate terroir. I'm like, no, I love it. I love wine. I love experiencing different wines. I love regions. I love areas. But for me, this was just a different take on something. And I think I got this question a few times in the beginning of sort of, you're so not traditional. And I said, yes, I'm not, but I'm not trying to be. I'm just giving a different take on something. And then we got into the concept through a few discussions of people saying, respecting terroir. And my thought behind it is blending happens all over the world. Varieties are blended from individual terroirs within countries. People are blending multiple vintages now. So the concept of wines and an interesting different take on it is sort of where I look at it and say, I'm respecting the terroir of each of the varieties. Malbec from Argentina, Merlot from Right Bank Bordeaux, Cab from Napa Valley, Cabernet Franc from South Africa, Petit Verdot from Spain. They're all individual terroir-driven varieties. And the groups we work with have centuries of knowledge. The grape farmers that we buy from, they generational owned. We work with the winemakers in each region. We respect the techniques of the country to make the variety the best we can. And then our fun side comes into blending, to creating something interesting and new. And what we've had is we've had a lot of people say they don't like it. And the concept and my idea is, well, perfect. If you don't like it, I'm not trying to convince you. I'm not trying to talk you into it. I'd love you to try it if you wanted to. And if you don't, I understand. But we've also had so many people going, wow, I'm a wine lover. I'd love to try this. We've had critics go, everyone should, who loves wine, try this wine, have some in their cellar, because it's something new. And yes, we get a bit of pushback at times, but I respect people's opinions. And if that's how they feel about the wine, I completely understand, I always invite them to have a glass with me if they want to. So I'm very open and fair on the fact that I know we are coming at a time where tradition in the industry is being particularly challenged. And I think for me, it's just something unique and new.
Well, no, look, this is one of our house views, which is, tradition needn't be the enemy of innovation. Indeed, actually, many of the greatest innovators are fascinated by and in love with the tradition of their product or discipline. But there is this funny idea that you can't do both. And I just said, well, the product, the wine proves that that's not...
You can do it.
That's not the case. And you should do it, indeed. And it's great. It's kind of a bit of a metaphor for how we all live, right? And the idea that there's no real monocultures and mono-identities anymore. Everyone's from everywhere. And again, that's kind of our values. Let me just ask you, though, about this idea of, I guess, what you're chasing in a way is this dream that there's, in a sense, maybe less vintage variation. You're not hostage to fortune to, well, perhaps you might have imagined you wouldn't be as hostage to fortune as a mono-regional wine. But actually, I guess that's not been the case. And if we go, so was it in 2020 when you had like smoke taint on California grapes? Now, did you not even make a wine that year? Had you sort of anticipated that you would still face those same kinds of challenges that you would get as a mono-regional maker?
So if you think about it, we actually have that challenge 5 times.
Yeah.
So someone the other day when I was in Singapore at Vinexpo said to me, you start harvest in sort of February and you end around November. And I was like, we harvest all year round. So we're anticipating and working with the challenges in each region because, like I say, each variety is made specifically as its own. So we deal with all the challenges of a single terroir 5 times. So, yes, in 2020, we had the fires in California. We lost all of our grapes to smoke taint, and our decision was the concept of Pangaea was 5 countries in 1 bottle, or 5 countries, 5 regions in 1 bottle. If we can't have one of the regions, we're not going to make the wine. I wanted to stick to my guns in that sense of the concept as a 5 varietal blend with specifically Cabernet Sauvignon being from Napa. And we couldn't make it that year. So 2020, we decided not to make a vintage. So yes, we deal with all the challenges and more across the countries. I'm very lucky to have amazing teams in each region. We communicate very well throughout the year. Myself and Michelle are traveling quite a lot, so we rely heavily on the people that we've invested time with. So yes, we deal with a lot.
And tell me about the drinks. Obviously, you're not making a huge quantity of the wine. I said earlier, it's pitched at people who enjoy wine, not at wine connoisseurs per se or collectors, but is there a typical drinker? Where are these bottles pitching up? Give us a rough idea of the kinds of conversations you have.
Well, it actually is pitched at the connoisseurs, the collectors, the drinkers, the people entering the industry that are interested in trying new things. We find we have younger generations very intrigued by the concept, sort of in a traditionalist sort of buying environment from father to grandfather, going, hey, I want to try some of this along with the other products I'm buying. So we're predominantly direct to consumer, so collectors and connoisseurs and drinkers all over the world. In the US, we have started a little bit more with on-consumption. So in New York, we're in Massa, Nobu, and a few other places around New York with that growing. We started recently. So our distribution team, that side, is going into the on-premise. We want to start growing the on-consumption market in very high-end fine restaurants around the world because we find that's where the consumers will come in and try a bottle. Into retail, we're looking into sort of the retail sector, into the high-end wine stores, the Hedonisms, the Ackers in New York, to give people the opportunity to get a bottle, try it, and then order, get on our mailing list and order directly from us. So first vintage, we made 3,300 bottles. We only released 2,600 to the market. 2016 was pretty similar, and we've grown to about 8,000 bottles production now. That is, for us, at a manageable sort of side in terms of our growth, where we're heading, opening up markets, current challenges in the wine industry. We do have the ability to make more of this wine because our vineyard sites have the capacity for us to get a bit more, but we'll never grow to insane levels of hundreds of thousands of bottles because it is instinctually an element of place for each variety, and those regions and the grape growers we use are unique, small, and interesting. So yes, we kind of have it everywhere. The easiest is obviously to buy it directly from us, DTC. We have distribution in London, all across the US, Switzerland, Germany, Hong Kong soon, hopefully, South Africa, Spain. I think that's
plenty of places.
Yeah, pretty much.
Get online and find out more.
Yeah.
And tell me then, in terms of the entrepreneurial journey then, because it's really interesting hearing about, there's obviously been an uptick in endorsements from this customer base. You can scale production, as you said, to a degree. I don't know, are you already under that pressure? Oh, come on, push further, more markets, more output? Or actually, is it growing in a fairly organic way? Are you happy with it? Are you having to check sometimes, overreaching? Do you feel that you're under pressure in that regard?
No, not really. I think it's growing organically. I think with any new product, the key is to get people talking about it, to get people seeing it, feeling it, tasting it. So I think the largest thing for us is with a global market is having to be in every place at the same time to sit with every consumer. So I find myself, the 1 year I told the guys, make me work. I bounced from Singapore to LA, across the world, everywhere, sitting with consumers, with clients, and that builds. You speak to one wine lover, they taste it, they drink it, and they enjoy, and they move forward, they tell their friends. So growing organically with a lot of hard work on the being present side of it. And I'm happy with where it's going. And I think from our initial founding days to where we are now. In some elements, we've grown faster than we thought we would have. And in some, we've grown quickly and sort of slowed down. The growth has slightly changed. But I think that's industry-wide at the moment with wine. So, yeah, very happy with where we're at. We've now got every vintage except 20 from 15 to 24, basically, either in barrel or bottle. The last of the 24 is obviously being harvested now at the end of the year. So, yeah, very happy with where we're at.
Nicely.
Yeah.
Tell me about, because they say, imitation is the greatest form of flattery or whatever. Has there been a pivot in narrative just around this idea of, a global blend? You mentioned the challenges in terms of expectations at the beginning. But are people going now, maybe we should try that? As you said, there's always been one or two outliers who've done a little bit of these kind of blending, but anyone?
There's been groups along the side that have done two varieties. As you know, I don't know if you know yet, Penfolds delved into that sort of side. I think it was 2018 was the first vintage of Quantum, which is Shiraz from Australia and Cabernet from Napa. The Penfolds group obviously owns a lot of vineyards worldwide, and they've launched that with great success. I saw some of the guys from Penfolds and I tasted it for the first time in Singapore. I thought it's a beautiful wine. And I think it illustrates my thought process of making great wines by blending great varietals. As you know, Australia makes one of the best Shiraz, and some of the best I think the best cab in the world comes from Napa. So Penfolds has started going into that sector. As far as I can tell, I haven't seen anything else pop up like that. So Penfolds is doing that from 2018 on, and I'm not sure if they have more plans to do more of that. But the consumer, I think, is getting more interested, is wanting to try new stuff. We've had great coverage in the press and the sort of critic side, which gives great validation to say the people who tell you what great wine is saying this is a great wine. So I think the challenges for me are changing mindset, getting people interested. For me, I use the word curiosity a lot as to why I started this. And that curiosity for travel, for growth, for experience is what led me to Pangaea. And I think a lot of people are wanting that in their lives. And the more I can reach, the better.
We should try it. Now, as I said, it is relatively early in the morning.
Yeah, if you want to, we can.
Well, no, but let's imagine that we've cracked it open, because I always like to do this. Often if we were talking wine on the show, we'll try maybe have a little glass. But imagine we have the glass here, we're rolling it around. Give me a bit of the nose, palate. So we're talking 2015. Give me a bit of the kind of just the wine lover's take. Imagine you've got the glass here. Describe to me colour first of all. A little bit of that.
Well, I can start with so the 2015 inaugural vintage, we bottled it. And as you can imagine, a wine like this took a long time to integrate because each of the varieties was so strong. It was almost like a prize fight for who was going to dominate. So the wine took a while to settle and integrate in the bottle. So we only released the 2015 in 2022, and we felt it was ready to open and start drinking. We recommend decanting for at least 2 hours on this wine, and it develops and changes hour to hour. But very deep, rich, purpley sort of color, a lot of Malbec from Argentina in there, your rich, heavier varietals from the New World. On the nose, you get a lot of sort of mocha, cedarwood, your traditional French Bordeaux-styled wine, so a little bit more reductive on the nose. We didn't want to go for over-extracted, big, jammy New World wine. We wanted something to stick to that tradition of what the Bordeaux blend was. So I always say New World fruit with Old World styling. So on the nose, you get a lot of this rich, intense fruit, maca, like I said, cedarwood, and you'll be struck by a sort of balance of acidity and tannin on the nose, and then through onto the palate, it hits every note. It's big, bold. I've had a lot of people say to me they can taste elements of each of the single varieties themselves, knowing the regions. If you're a drinker who's had a lot of Malbec from Argentina, a lot of Cab from Napa, and that follows through with integrated tannins and just a long finish. Very smooth, elegant wine.
And I love that idea of, have you managed to wrong foot or almost like coax somebody into trying it, really doesn't even know the story at all, and get them to try and pick out those threads, that blend of heritage? It must be kind of, can you almost kind of see the cogs ticking in people's brains as they're trying to figure out what this thing is?
So yes, we have with some people who know wine very well, who are very much seasoned in the wine industry, and they sort of sit, and initially they're sort of taken aback as to, so confused, what is this? And I think also drinking wine in a place dictates some of your mindset. So being given something to taste by me in a country where you would expect the wine to almost come from there kind of leads that thought process. Once you start to tell people, they start to piece it in their head and they're like, oh my word, okay, I can pick this up. And I think it's not necessarily dominant, something they would try, but they sort of know what Malbec from Argentina, the characteristics. And they're like, oh, I get a bit of that, which you wouldn't get in some other regions of the world. They have the characteristics of Cab from Napa, which they'll pick up and be like, but you don't get that anywhere else in the world. So we've had a few people from Blind be kind of confused and intrigued and interested. And as the discussion goes along and the wine starts to open, it's very interesting. Through some of the critics, we've had, drinking windows on this wine, 2028 to 2047, I think it was on this vintage. So we've really achieved our mark of elegant, ageable wines with beautiful structure that will just develop over time. So I think as you drink it from decanting at the table, the wine evolves and it becomes something very interesting for the consumer to try. So we challenge people to say, like, here's the varieties, this is what you're looking at, this is what you should be tasting. Tell us if you can pick it apart. So
I kind of love the idea. And again, there's all these rich metaphors, aren't there? This idea, it's the consequence of a global journey and an entrepreneurial journey that you went on, and then literally on the palate, it's taking you on that road around. It's really compelling. Just final thought, yourself, Michelle, I don't know, it's a bit like Willy Wonka, but for wine instead of chocolate. What else have you got up your sleeves? Any other? You must. So are you getting even crazier ideas now once you've had a few more cigars and glasses over the dinner table?
Well, to be honest, I don't know if we can get much crazier than this. The logistics behind this has made me go grey and age probably 10 years. Yeah, we've discussed elements of, I've mentioned it before in a few interviews. We've looked at the concept of wines in a different category, approaching a different wine drinking community of wines that basically haven't existed in the world before. So less so in terms of the global footprint of the blend, but varieties that grow in individual countries that have not been blended with others before. So to open up that market to say, this is a wine that has never existed. This blend has never existed. It's never been done before because these grapes won't grow in the same region, really. So we have that concept. We've been slowly tweaking it and thinking about ways to approach it. And every time we spend time together, we discuss another one. And I think we'll be there soon on that concept to say a more consumer-friendly, retail-driven version of the business across the world with wines that will intrigue the consumer to try something that is truly a world first in its own again. So the logistics of that will probably kill me, but it'll be fun to try.
Exactly.
And I think it'll be really fun to drink.
That was Travis Braithwaite, the founder of Pangaea. And since we spoke, Travis and winemaker Michel Rolland have concluded a month of blending sessions in Napa, California, where they were finalising the blend for Pangaea's 2022 vintage. Travis is also preparing for the release of the 2017 vintage, which will be available to members of the allocation list in November. To find out more, head to pangaeaestates.com. You're listening to The Entrepreneurs, and I'm delighted to say that our somewhat boozy journey continues with acclaimed wine writer, editor of Wine Cellar Journal, and very good friend of Monocle, Chandra Kurt. Chandra, welcome to the programme. Always a delight to speak to you. I'm always just sad that we can't be clinking glasses while we're chatting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, listen, we just heard from Travis there, and he was talking a little bit to me after we spoke about some of the bigger challenges actually for the wine industry. And before we get to the sunny uplands, let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges. One thing he mentioned that really took me back was that wine consumption's maybe tracking down. And I kind of thought, well, this can't be right. But is that a bit of a worry? What's your take on where the market's at the moment?
Well, he is absolutely right, and it is not yet, let's say, very alarming, but wine consumption goes down because our eating habits changed a little bit. You have a new generation coming that thinks different about body or health, so they didn't realize that alcohol can be something good, or not yet, because, since there's humankind, there is wine drinking, or at least beer drinking. So it's not only bad, but you also have, with warmer climate, you want to drink different. And then, of course, you have this growth of non-alcoholic wines, or they're not wines, they shouldn't be called wines, but non-alcoholic drinks. So it's a kind of a total time of fragmentation. And I think for a lot of wineries, it's not going to be easy to keep up with all of this new orientation and changes.
Yeah, lots of pressures. But listen, Monocle so well. And obviously, we always look for optimism, don't we? Avenues of opportunity. Tell me a little bit about where we should look, Chandra, where there's really good news stories, maybe that are bucking those trends and demonstrating maybe the way to, bring the new generation on board and to make sure that people really appreciate that an enjoyment of wine. It's not just about health and well-being. There's so much more to it. Where should we be looking to find that kind of inspiration?
Well, the beautiful thing is you find it all over. And what is nice, you can start by looking at small wine producers, like more farming wine places where food and wine and land and animals on the land are connected. Because what you find more and more is like farms which really don't do only wine, but also other kind of nutrition. They plant wines that come from the country, are local, regional. So what I want to say is go start regional, because the regional creation is booming. And I think it's also good for us not to travel too far sometimes, and really to support also the regional production.
Well, that leads me very elegantly onto, of course, what Monocle does. We very much fly the flag for wine drinking. But specifically, we actually have a new wine, don't we? Our listeners, if they're in Zurich, they can head to Duvelstrasse and enjoy for themselves. I know you've sampled it, Chandra. Tell us a little bit and tell our listeners a little bit about what that is and how it represents some of Monocle's values as well.
Yeah, so the beautiful thing is there's really that the Monocle family that I love very much. They also love to drink wine. And we are here in Switzerland, or the headquarters is now in Switzerland. Some other countries will not know, but in Switzerland we have a wonderful wine production that we hardly export because we drink it all in the country. We are like unique in this. And so together with Tyler, I think it's the third wine we created. Now came out our Non Filtré. It's a special wine from Neuchâtel, from down with our major grape Chasselas, which is a neutral taste in wine, in white wine, like it fits to our neutral country. And no filtre, why? Because it's unfiltered and it has a little bit still yeast in it. So usually before you drink this like refreshing dry white, you shake the bottle, shake it up and down, and then it gets more cloudy. And it's a wonderful aperitif wine that you can also enjoy to light dishes or fish or cheese. Like in Switzerland, this is very common to do.
I love the sound of that. And just on that point, Chandra, I'm still, it's been sort of a little bit sunnier actually this week in London. So I'm kind of doubling down that it's still summer. A playful Provençal rosé, that's fine. I will still drink a Vino Verde. I'm not letting summer go. But as the kind of autumn draws in a little bit, what do we do? Do we just pivot directly to red? Or what other things should I be thinking about if I want to kind of keep a little bit of summer playfulness, but, reflect that the evenings are mellowing a little?
Yeah, the funny thing is about, you mentioned red wine, red wine consumption like globally goes slightly down. And this is also connected to the climate that changed a little bit and our eating habits. But you find new red wines on the market now that are like lighter red wines that you even drink chilled, for example. So you could start with something like this coming from the Etna, like a Nerello Mascalese, or, some Beaujolais that is not too heavy. So lighter red wines would be surely a good way to go. What is very much booming, of course, white wine is always in, but are the sparkling wines. And they don't have necessarily to be coming from the Champagne. They come from all over and can be in style like the natural direction, which are the pet nut wines. They are very lightly gentle. Or you go like to Italy, the Franciacorta, Trento Doc. I'm just back yesterday. I was in Penedès to taste some cavas and what is going on there. And they really, pricely, are very attractive. So the whole cava production. So I think sparkling wine, anyway, you always feel good when enjoying some bubbles. So why not to stock up your frigo with some sparkle?
I love a bit of that. I've been enjoying some Chacolí from northern Spain, which is only a light fizz to it, but that kind of ticks the box. And just tell me one last thing, Chandra, in terms of, I know you said we should try and look local and think about supply lines and all the rest of it, but if there's a new market to discover wine-wise, where should I go in the world? Because, I love the fact that you find a new kind of, a chocolate somewhere that you've forgotten about, or you can look to the Far East and there's all new things happening in wine. Is there somewhere, I don't know, even if we look further ahead into 2025, for example, that you're most excited to be going?
So let's look up in the sky. Let's go high. Let's think high. So there are two different directions. So if you go to the north of Europe, like say Sweden, Denmark, of course, it's still tiny vineyard areas, but they're planting, they're growing. So it's very exciting what is happening there. They work with these PV grapes, the Pilz resistant. So it's a new taste that are growing there. And in general, the other direction, also go to high level plantation, which is also because of the climate change, especially in South America, you find like from Peru, Bolivia, you find all kinds of new wines coming out. And I will be following this now for the future a little bit.
Lovely stuff. Well, Chandra Kurt, it's always an absolute delight to chat to you. Thanks for being with us on The Entrepreneurs. And that's all for this episode of The Entrepreneurs. We'll be back at the same time next week. Do look out for Eureka, available every Friday. The programme was produced by Laura Kramer with audio editing by Jack Chewers. You can listen again and find out more about the show at monocle.com. That's where you can subscribe to Monocle magazine and read more about better businesses and plenty of great wines, usually every month. If you want to contact the Entrepreneurs team, email Laura on lrk@monocle.com. I'm Tom Edwards. Goodbye, and thanks for listening to The Entrepreneurs.
"2024 is a pivotal year for global politics. Meanwhile, conflict, climate change, and AI dominate the headlines. What do these global stories mean for you? The Financial Times offers fearless thinking in defining moments. Its trusted journalists deliver impartial analysis on the world's biggest news events, helping you to form your own bold opinions. Start reading the Financial Times at ft.com.